Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503 Community Media Production, and this is the overview summary presentation video for the 12th lecture, which is about the idea of managerialism. And the thinking behind this module is to contextualise how community media and issues based around community development are integrated with or opposed to a kind of form of management which is dominant in developed countries, kind of America. It kind of originates in America and the UK, around a kind of what we call an instrumentalism, which is a kind of the kind of positivist science that comes from the principle and the idea, if you like, that you can change and manage culture and communities in the same way that you might change and manage samples in a petri dish, or in chemicals in a test tube, that kind of thing, so that you can apply rationality and that you can apply scientific methods to people. And this is something that is kind of the 20th century in many ways was defined by the dominance of this kind of thinking. So whether it was Soviet thinking, kind of communist thinking, that you could have an organised, structured, scientifically managed society and economy, or whether it's the free marketeers who regard the workings of the market, the neoliberal market, as independent of values and independent of a sense of human engagement, whereas where people are just making economically rational, independently rational decisions based on their needs. And this kind of takes an approach which questions that and says, does the kind of forms of management style, the languages, the techniques of management, does that really enable us to develop as people and to develop as communities? So we'll go through some issues about related to this. I've done the PowerPoint presentation, which has got some clips and some images and diagrams. So I don't post those on the wiki, but I've done the notes, which I will post on the wiki as a PDF that you can download. They're available now to read, and there's also some reading associated with this, and a video that you can watch. So the reading is a paper I found, a journal article that I found about managerialism in public services and the differences between private sector and public sector ideas of modernisation. And you might recall that kind of over the last 20 years, longer in fact, one of the arguments that have been made about reform in public services is that they need to be modernised. And I've always wondered what this meant until you kind of start to unpick that and you find out that it means applying rationalist techniques of management, which are centralised and which are bureaucratically controlled, and which are based on data and information management rather than local knowledge and local decision making and local determination. So what we'll look at is the principle of managerialism is that the manager knows best, and that all of the decision making process is upwards. The key decisions are taken at the top. And the chief executive of an organisation is somebody who is the primary decision-making pin, if you like, and all of the other structure around an organisation, whether it's a health service organisation, a factory, a local authority, a school, is centred on that person's capability of making decisions, and they're regarded as being the brain of the business of the organisation. And therefore everybody else fits in with that decision-making process. So the power is centralised in the middle, and all the data and information gathering processes, they are focused on informing that key individual and their key team, and that any other peripheral and distributed information around them is relegated to a service provision, if you like, where you just action what somebody else has already decided. So there's issues like managers are kind of free of experience in the field that they're managing. So you could be managing a shoe factory, or you could be managing a hotel, or you could be managing a school, or you could be managing a shop. Whatever it is, management is management, and the role itself can be very different. And there's ways of unpicking this and looking at different models where actually that doesn't play out. So community media and community development kind of has to play a different game, and it generates ideas through a different process, the bottom-up process, where people engage and discuss and have conversations over cups of tea, rather than attending business management meetings and process-driven meetings. So we'll look at this in terms of things like the processes of evaluation and monitoring, the processes of risk management, legal liability, a kind of an obsession with organisation, and how all of these things actually don't make us any more productive. What they do, in a way, is they cement and they buttress a kind of an obsession with the secondary activities and not with the primary activities. So you can ask the question, having more managers, which is often the response to a problem, does it change anything? Whereas the empowerment of people to actually be trusted to do their jobs and to trusted to have that their voices is well considered and articulate some ideas which do make a difference, that kind of is not, that's opaque, that's ignored. So it's a very kind of different way. And we'll look at some techniques that are recommended by Jim Ife, about the idea of the kind of alternative ways that community developers and community media advocates can suggest and argue that there are other ways to do things, that the language that we use, the kind of a disposition that we adopt can be different. And I think this is the power of community media and the power of community development, to say, hang on, there's an alternative way of doing this. So up on the wiki, there's an article about the kind of managerialist approach and the exclusivity that's talked about. There is no alternative to modernisation is the kind of mantra of, well, it was the mantra of the New Labour era. And maybe we're seeing the kind of the dissatisfaction with that kind of approach. But there's a great talk which is given by the late Russell Ackoff, who was a professor of business systems thinking, who really challenges a lot of this kind of thinking. And he gave a presentation at a conference, and it's a few years old now. The video's really interesting to watch, and he talks about kind of what systems thinking, which a lot of managerialism is based around, actually undermines. And he talks about a more holistic approach, a more design-led approach, a less outcomes-focused approach, and a more process-based approach to development. So that's well worth watching. That's posted up on the wiki. So that's it for now. 8 minutes, that's a long time to talk, but I'll see you at the lecture on Thursday.